Why group rides fail, the psychological friction of different riding archetypes. The illusion of unity. Every Sunday morning, in parking lots and gas stations across the world, a silent ritual takes place. Helmets are buckled, gloves are cinched, and engines are brought to life. In those moments, there is a strong sense of tribalism. Riders look to the left and right and see reflections of themselves. Different bikes and personalities may be present, but the emotional impression is the same, that everyone is here for one shared purpose. Before the ride begins, it feels natural to believe the group is united by the same hunger for movement, freedom, and rhythm. That is why the start of a group ride feels so cohesive. Without saying it aloud, riders sign an invisible social contract. For the next few hours, they will move as one, share the same pace, interpret the same corners, and enjoy the same version of the road. But that unity is mostly an illusion. The moment the kickstands go up, the group begins to separate psychologically. Inside those helmets, there is no collective consciousness. There are only individuals with different temperaments, different relationships to risk, and different ideas of what riding is supposed to be. This is why group rides rarely fail, for simple reasons like the route or the machine. What truly destabilizes them is psychological friction. The tension comes from incompatible riding identities that look unified in the parking lot, but quickly begin to clash on the road. What starts as camaraderie often ends in quiet distance, because the group was never as internally aligned as it seemed. The data-obsessed perfectionist, the scientist of the apex. The first archetype is the data-obsessed perfectionist. For this rider, the motorcycle is not a toy or casual escape. It is a precision instrument. Riding is not just recreation. It is a technical exercise in control, efficiency, and refinement. They are the kind of rider who knows tire pressure exactly, notices subtle setup changes, and treats maintenance as part of the discipline of riding rather than a chore. On a demanding road, the perfectionist's mind becomes highly analytical. They are not primarily looking at the scenery or atmosphere. They are scanning surface quality, corner shape, entry speed, apex placement, and exit drive. To them, a corner is a problem to solve correctly. A clean line feels like proof of mastery, while even a small mistake can feel like failure. Their goal is not just speed, but consistency. They seek a kind of technical zen, where rider and machine work together with almost no wasted movement. The problem is that this mindset does not disappear in a group. The perfectionist notices bad lines, unstable inputs, unnecessary corrections, and what they see as wasted momentum in other riders. If they are behind someone, they are often evaluating as much as they are following. To them, the road is a laboratory, and anything that disrupts the clean logic of the ride feels like bad science. The chaotic thrill seeker, the jazz musician of the asphalt. On the opposite end sits the chaotic thrill seeker. If the perfectionist is a scientist, the thrill seeker is an improvisational artist. They do not ride to reduce variables, they ride to feel them. The motorcycle for them is not just a machine to control, but a source of sensation, expression, and intensity. The thrill seeker does not care much about the perfect line because perfection can feel emotionally empty. They want the front wheel light, the rear tire communicating, the bike moving beneath them in ways that feel alive. They are drawn to the reactive and improvised side of riding. They may even choose a technically worse line simply because it creates a stronger sensation or a more instinctive response. What matters to them is not clean execution, but raw involvement. From their perspective, the perfectionist can look rigid and disconnected from the real spirit of riding. They do not see discipline. They see emotional sterilization. If the ride becomes too controlled, too repeatable, too technical, it stops feeling alive. The thrill seeker is chasing the moment where analysis disappears and instinct takes over. The friction. Why the social contract snaps. The friction between these riders becomes unavoidable once they are placed in the same group. The issue is not just that one is smoother and the other more aggressive. The deeper problem is that each believes, usually without realizing it, that their style reflects the real meaning of riding. Once that belief takes hold, the other rider's behavior does not just seem different, it seems wrong. For the perfectionist, the thrill-seeker's style looks like chaos contaminating the flow of the ride. A wheelie, a late correction, or an unstable exit feels like a needless variable that ruins rhythm and increases risk. The perfectionist becomes more tense because the clean equation of the ride has been interrupted. Meanwhile, the thrill-seeker experiences the perfectionist's smooth control as suffocating. The ride starts to feel overmanaged, flat, and constrained by invisible rules. They feel watched, judged, and boxed in by someone else's philosophy of what riding should be. Another reason this friction feels so intense is because neither rider sees their approach as a preference. They experience it as common sense. The perfectionist believes that smoothness, predictability, and discipline are simply the mature way to ride, especially in a group where one person's mistake can affect everyone else. The thrill-seeker, on the other hand, feels that too much control drains the life out of the experience and turns something visceral into something mechanical. Because both riders feel internally justified, they do not interpret the conflict as a difference in style. They interpret it as evidence that the other person does not really understand what riding is meant to be. This is why group tension often appears long before anyone says a word. It shows up in pacing decisions, following distance, overtakes, body language at stops, and the subtle emotional temperature of the ride. Nobody has to argue for the disagreement to be real. It is already present in the way one rider feels irritated while the other feels restricted. By the time the helmets come off, the psychological split has already happened. The ride may have looked organized from the outside, but internally it has become a quiet contest between incompatible definitions of control, freedom, and meaning. And once that contest begins, even small moments start carrying extra weight. A slightly early pass, a widening gap, or a visible shake of the head at a stop can reinforce the feeling that the group is no longer moving together in spirit, only in formation. That is when the social contract snaps. They are no longer sharing a road in the same way. They are living through competing interpretations of the same experience. One is trying to master the laws of physics through precision, while the other is trying to feel alive by pressing against them. By the end of the ride, the tension may remain unspoken, but it is felt in the silences, the impatience, and the sense that the day delivered less than it promised. The conclusion: the survival of the group. The real tragedy is not that these archetypes exist, but that riders rarely talk about them. They talk about bikes, gear, horsepower, and routes, but almost never about the psychological reason each person rides the way they do. That silence is what makes friction inevitable. Shared motorcycles and shared roads do not automatically create shared meaning. A group ride only succeeds when riders recognize that the person in their mirrors may be having a completely different experience of the same road. One rider's perfect pace may feel lifeless to someone else, and someone else's thrill may feel like a safety hazard to you. That requires empathy, which is difficult to access when speed, pride, and adrenaline are involved. In the end, riders do not ride to become identical. They ride to find something personal within themselves, and that something is not the same for everyone. Until that is understood, a group ride remains fragile. It is not always a true collective. Sometimes it is just a temporary formation of individuals, each carrying a different definition of freedom, waiting for psychological friction to catch fire.